Hi there, welcome back to the High Tech Business Channel. This opportunity we're going to share a series of 5 videos about account planning. In the first video that we're going to watch, which is the one that we'll start right now, we're going to look into segmentation. So, just for general information, an account plan can be thought out as the documented way of a sales process. When you have a sales process, you have the opportunity that you identify, you analyze the risk, you look into your products and services, and you try to match those to the client needs. Then you put together the necessary value proposition for your client, and then you might participate in an RFP, or you will try to influence the specs of those requirements that your clients might have, and so on and so forth. Then you have to negotiate and all of that. The written format of that sales cycle process is what we call an account plan. Now, in account plan there are many things, but one important one is what we call segmentation. So we're going to take a look into segmentation related to mass market of one, and business to business or large business, government to business, and so on and so forth. Before we jump into the segmentation process, right now we have to remember that back in 1960, Everett Rogers wrote a book, 1962, he wrote a book called Diffusion Innovation. Everett Rogers was a scholar. He did his PhD at Ohio State University, then he moved to Iowa and State University, and then finally he was a scholar for the University of New Mexico. What he noticed, he paid attention for more than 500 companies, and he realized that there was a process that was mostly happening in each company. That is to say, when they introduce a new product, you see only certain percentage, 2.5% in the great majority, would adopt that technology, and then it will move into 13.5% of the total companies that were acquiring that technology, and then the early majority, late majority, and laggards. He did more than 500 studies in many companies, both local and international, and how they adopt seeds, for instance, how they adopt new medicines, and so on and so forth. So he came up with those numbers. We've used these numbers in one of our business that we shared previously when we didn't have the complete information from the client, we were introducing a new technology and we wanted to know exactly how to really make a forecast. And because we didn't have that information, we used the Rogers curve. We also call it the technology adoption curve. On the other hand, also back in the 60s, mid-60s, Raymond Vermond realized that there was some, he was in the international trade, and he realized that the products, when they were first launched, were going to have a growth until they reach certain level of maturity, at which point they will decline. He called that the product life cycle. As you might remember, Raymond Vermond was very relevant because he was behind all in World War II of the Marshall Plan, and that's not a minor thing. He went to the College of New York, and then he did his PhD, if I'm not mistaken, in Columbia University in New York. So he did this curve. So we have to be aware of those curves when we're doing segmentation, because we know if it is a new technology, new product, that we're going to land the product or services within those percentages, and then time is a matter of how we move the businesses. Let's look at a couple of examples of something that went well, something that went wrong, like always, and then we'll look into some examples that we were part of. As you know, a few years ago, by 2016, IBM was selected to do the Australian Census project. The overall idea was to allow the citizens, the Australian citizens, to log into the web, load their data, and that was it. They didn't have to move to one place or to another, or somebody had to go to their house to do the census, right? But there were some issues they didn't attend, which was that there was some denial of services. When the product was launched, no one could access the web page to load the information. And the situation was that both IBM and the government didn't properly communicate each other, didn't manage the segmentation of each requirement, in particular when you're doing a census and so on and so forth. So this deal went sour. There are a lot of learnings for not segmenting the business properly. On the other case, this is a very, very interesting story. You know that back in 2004, 2005, Motorola was doing good in the mobile business world, and they wanted to include into one of the mobiles, which was called Rocker, songs. They realized that despite that the pod and iPod were launched, they were fixed, they were not wireless. So what Motorola wanted was to include the possibility of having in your cell phone songs. And in fact, they did. They closed a deal with iTunes, well, with Apple. Apple allowed them to integrate iTunes, but the limited capacity of the mobile phone was only 100 songs. And actually, the interface was kind of complicated, cumbersome, and so on and so forth. So it wasn't very successful. But up until that point in time, Motorola was the first company launching this music in the phone, these songs in the phone. Then Apple realized that was a good opportunity, and they were already developing touchscreen solutions. They acquired another company, so they decided to put a group together and work secretly and launch the iPhone 2007, and the rest is history. Now, is it that Motorola didn't have a segmentation properly done? No, Motorola did a lot of segmentation, but the reality of it is based on the experience of the interface of the music that the team in Apple had, was the competitive advantage, and they learned also from the Motorola failure, and they learned all of that, so they could leverage that technology and that information and that failure that Motorola had when they launched the Rocker, was the name of the product. So they launched this new iPhone 2007, which changed completely the mobile industry. Another nice sample for you when we're talking about segmentation is that again, just to give a thumbs up to Motorola, back in those years, in 2000, early 2000, and so on and so forth, Motorola was selling a lot of radio system trunking systems. There were not many cellular systems going around, at least in Central America, for instance. So they were selling trunking radio, two-way radio systems, right? But they did not only do that, but they accompany every system that they propose, and they try to look for investors and for new service providers who are going to be operating in those territories. They provided the complete end-to-end solution. The solution included not only the technology, but also how to sell it, how to segment the market, and so on and so forth. So those two marketing tools, how to sell it, how to segment the market, what was the value proposition that they needed to do, how much they had to charge sometimes, and things of that nature, will really gave the operator or the new operator the peace of mind necessary to move forward. And then one thing came after the other, and then all of these companies started to have a complete two-way radio system, which migrated later into what we know today as the mobile solutions and business systems. So what do we have in the mass market of one? We already talked about the iPhone and about the Motorola Rocker. something that also didn't work properly because they didn't do the segmentation as they should was the Motorola Radio. As you know, those were the 66 satellite that Motorola launched, and they had to do a write-off of about $1,200,000 back in those years, which is not that much money nowadays. But they almost went bankrupt, and but it was not because the solution didn't work. It was because they were comparing apples to oranges, because the Iridium phone they need to look at the satellite and the wave to not come into the in-building. So it wasn't successful in that way, and also the pricing was an issue there. For instance, another thing that did right with regard to segmentation was Canon versus Kodak. For instance, Kodak lost the market share, lost everything because they didn't embrace digitalization. But on the other hand, Canon did embrace digitalization, and they kept on being successful in the camera business. Likewise with the smartphones. Another stories about large account, we already talked about the IBM and Australian Census contract, but a good segmentation process was done by SpaceX. So the US is again back into the space thanks to this investment from the private company. And another good business movement is that one from Salesforce. Salesforce did a set of value propositions and segmentation to the industry for both large and small, and they also were very successful on that. On the other hand, something that didn't go properly good was Microsoft and Universal. Universal didn't do it, and Microsoft couldn't put together a good deal, but they tried to make it happen. So to finalize this series of stories, I want you to take the following takeaways: that you need to look into the diffusion of innovation, the product life cycle, like we mentioned before, as tools that you can use for your segmentation process, and pay a lot of attention to those type of steps within your sales cycle and within your account planning documentation. Next video is going to be about account plan executive summary. So I hope to see you next week, and smash the like button and subscribe, and see you next week. Stay safe.